The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL. You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is the status of this Collusion story where it has not really been picked up by like the largest media outlets, but like it's out there? Pablo Torre found some stuff.
Well, it got picked up today by ESPN, actually.
Oh, well, here we are. Awesome.
Yeah, so I scooped him by a day, so take that.
So this is Arif, for those who don't listen to the football parties, I guess. Arif has Wide Left, and at Wide Left, there's a big write-up on this big Collusion story. So just in a bare-bones way to catch people up who maybe missed this whole thing, what happened? What's going on?
So last year, the NFLPA's collusion case against the NFL, which is an argument where they allege that the NFL the teams collaborated together in order to prevent players from receiving fully guaranteed contracts. And that both violates the law, but more importantly, because the law actually doesn't matter when you have a comprehensive bargaining agreement, it violates the terms of the agreement that the NFLPA and the NFL struck together. So they brought that forward a couple of years ago. The conclusion of that was 6 months ago. So, I guess not last year, but functionally last year. And the arbitrator concluded that the NFL really tried hard to collude, but ultimately failed. And in one of the few cases where attempting to commit a crime is not also a crime, I guess, the arbitrator ruled in the NFL's favor, and there were no damages awarded to the NFLPA. So that's what happened. Is that a good enough summary?
We're setting the stage. So the idea that the NFL colluded is based off of a story that many might remember about Lamar Jackson, in which Lamar Jackson was given the non-exclusive franchise tag, the one where a team can trade 2 first-round picks if the Ravens want to or don't want to match their contract, right? The Ravens get a chance to match. Mm-hmm. If they say no, Lamar Jackson becomes yours at the contract you signed him to, but you have to give the Ravens 2 first-round picks. A deal that seems like something that many people should have been interested in because Lamar Jackson is very good at football. I feel like I'm not out on any controversial limbs there, but nobody, not only did nobody offer anything to Lamar Jackson, nobody had any discussions with Lamar Jackson, which was extraordinarily suspicious at the time. And there are, I guess, 2 facets of this that I want to jump into with you. But first, the nature of that, the nature of the fact that like nobody wanted this, and how ridiculous that is on its face, and like the kind of, I guess, stuff that was going on behind the scenes during that time that we're now just finding out about. So like, what happened?
That's big question. What happened?
Yeah, but question for you. What?
Yeah. So there were a couple of cases that the NFLPA brought forward, all involving quarterbacks: Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and now Lamar Jackson. And the Lamar Jackson one is the one that's like interesting to me because I don't see a world where like Russell Wilson should earn a fully guaranteed deal in the time that it was alleged he should have, because the Seattle Seahawks just got rid of him in that world, right? So, okay, sure. But in either case, all 3 quarterbacks were class members of this. It's not a lawsuit, but would be considered class members of this class action lawsuit were it won. But the one that's most interesting is Lamar Jackson. So like you said, the Ravens placed a version of the franchise tag, which I believe is called the exclusive rights franchise tag, which is the non-exclusive franchise tag. It's very confusing, and I love
the 2 first-round picks one.
Yeah. So if you sign the guy, you give the 2 first-round picks, and if no one does it, then he gets a lower amount of money than if you'd placed the super special franchise tag, which is one of the franchise tags that was placed on Kirk Cousins a while ago. But not both of them. It's
Jesus.
But yeah, so this allowed Lamar Jackson to have negotiations with teams about what his compensation would look like were he to join that team. So teams have to come up with an offer, provide him that offer, and then the Ravens have the right to match that offer. And if the Ravens match that offer, then they replicate those contract terms exactly, identically, no changes.
Right.
And
with some rules set in so you don't get poison pilled. Everybody remembers.
The Steve Hutchinson, that rule.
So the reason teams didn't do this, didn't give an offer or even contact Lamar Jackson's mom about an offer. That's right? It's his mom or him personally.
It is him, but his mom is like, man, if they had contacted his mom, it would have sufficed. But yeah, technically,
okay, is his manager, which is I guess different because that's like brand stuff. But okay, so nobody, which is crazy. They had some pretty bad excuses. Can you go over some of your favorite bad excuses for why a team maybe wouldn't have gone for Lamar Jackson, even at times where they were like making do with some pretty bad stuff?
Yeah. Teams who were like sporting rosters that had Aiden O'Connell taking significant snaps and Zach Wilson and Desmond Ridder. You know, the
like there's always like 2 or 3 teams that just like don't have that guy.
Yeah, and this was
someone's always doing this.
A market, if you remember, this was a market where a lot of quarterbacks actually moved, right? So you had the Jets getting Aaron Rodgers, you had the Saints getting Derek Carr, you had the Raiders doing whatever they did, I don't remember anymore. And then you had 4 teams draft quarterbacks in like the top 6 picks or whatever it was, like, or 3 teams. I don't know. Will Levis doesn't count, but
I even think of like the Vikings had Kirk Cousins. That would have been an upgrade, no? Like,
yeah, no, for sure. Like,
and how many teams had a worse QB situation than Kirk Cousins? Like, many.
Very few teams where Lamar Jackson wouldn't have been an upgrade, and that's even acknowledging the fact that Lamar Jackson back between 2022 and 2023 wasn't as well regarded as he is now because he had only won 1 MVP and only had 2 Pro Bowls to his name. So
yeah, more has been accomplished since, sort of proving how wrong it was. But like, so the excuses were bad.
Yeah, the excuses were incredible. We don't want to upset our locker rooms or upset any of the quarterbacks that we currently have on our roster, which, like, if you're mood managing Zach Wilson, I don't know, like, what your priorities are. But, you know, you don't want to do that. It's too hard. That's my favorite one. It's just so hard, you know, to negotiate. And then the Ravens could just sign him. You know, you don't want to negotiate. You want to spend all this time and do the Ravens work for them to come up with a contract structure, which is like your only job is to come up with contract structures. Like
there's like a guy for that.
Yeah.
Well, and like if you're the Steelers, like, what do you mean you could negotiate an insane contract with tons of guarantees and then make the Ravens like use it or lose it? Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, you got Kenny Pickett in the building right now, so you're going to be pretty happy with that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the Ravens called your bluff, and now you have Lamar Jackson. Oh, I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they didn't want to do the Ravens work for them. They didn't think Lamar Jackson was actually interested in signing with another team, which I think is a great one because no one contacted him, right? Like, there's a difference between no one offered him any money or offered him a contract, and no one contacted him. Like, the idea that they could gauge his level of interest without ever talking to him is obscene. Other ones were, it's really difficult to build an offense with a running quarterback. Which, you know, like, what's great about this is that some of the teams that were supposed to have contacted him or would have been in the running that even testified ended up running offenses with running quarterbacks, right? Like, the Atlanta Falcons, like, were like 2nd or 3rd in the league in quarterback runs, like, the following year. Like, I'm sorry, it's difficult to incorporate that. Also, they're worried about Lamar Jackson's injury risk, which I know for like a lot of people, like, oh yeah, you got to be worried about injury risk with Lamar Jackson. But like the guys that that a lot of these teams ended up with, Derek Carr, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, had missed more games than Lamar Jackson. The Atlanta Falcons later signed Kirk Cousins, who had missed a whole half of a year, and he's like 40, right? But the injury risk wasn't a concern then. So like those were the excuses that teams came up with for never contacting Lamar Jackson to even see what a contract structure would look like at all, which is I think if you were to here, let me give some advice to how to do illegal stuff to the NFL real quick. You got to make it look like you're putting in an effort. Like you should in bad faith call him and then just say, yeah, he couldn't meet her.
Just to put up the face.
Right.
Yeah.
And that
because then none of this would have been, oh, we called and then we didn't like what we heard. So he asked for too much money and we hung up, and everybody would have to kind of be like, okay.
Yeah. Like you could have just done that. This is as bad as the time Bill Belichick accidentally texted Brian Flores to congratulate him on the job he was about to interview for, and that's how Brian Flores found out he wasn't getting the Giants job.
He went to the wrong Brian.
Because Brian Daboll is right next to Brian Flores and Bill Belichick's phone, and it's honestly one of the more relatable things I've ever heard about Bill Belichick. But
an
it's
increasingly less relatable man.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Look, they're saving you money already.
It's great to be a Hall of Famer, but will Travis Kelce get back to form?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Will Travis Kelce get back to his former form? And I am here to say, yes, it is all afterburner right now. There is nothing left. There's no contract after this. There is nothing. He has more business ventures than I can even list. And everything that I see from both his appearances, his podcast itself, he can see that this is close to the end. Could they drag him back for one more season after this? I think it's possible, but it depends on how this season goes. And I think if he truly is lighter like he appears and dedicated like he appears and understands just what this season could be for the legend that is Travis Kelce, I think he will be back to form. How do you feel?
Like he can be. It's just a question of whether or not it was really father time or it was just not being in the shape that he wished he was in last season. And that's really the big question. And we won't really know. I don't even know that we'll know in training camp. We may not know until really the regular season starts, when he's out there on the field and we see whether or not he can separate like he used to be able to do. But the reality of his game, and this kind of goes back to what we kind of talked about with Nick Bolton in a sense, is it's his instincts that really make him the best tight end in football. It's always been his instincts. It's always been the way he's been able to read the defense and be able to know what's going on the field with everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's not necessarily his speed, while it is good, and it wasn't for Nick Bolton, but Travis Kelce's speed was good. Whether or not it's still good is going to be the question, but his instincts make him one of the best to ever play the game.
Yeah, and I think you get examples of that. Top end speed is not his thing. It's the ability to make differential movements. And he tried to explain it. And if you've seen his latest podcast, he goes into a little bit about his oratory down at tight end U. There's more that he could have done there. I don't think that was his best performance. But when he talks about lowering his center of gravity so that he can go slow in order to go fast out of the cut, his kind of loping maneuver that we've always seen with the long strides that then he just starts to pull away from people, that's still him. And whether he's quite as young as he used to be or not, I don't think that type of route running changes. I do think if he's lighter, it allows him to lower his center of gravity and explode out of those cuts better. Even though he didn't do a very good job explaining it at tight end U, I do think that it's consistent, and a lighter overall mass that he has to change direction of will be beneficial. And with a full core of complementary pieces to throw the ball to, I think he can get back to his normal 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, whatever it is.
Man, that's rich. I don't know that I would go that far. I think he gets to 700, 800 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns, maybe more. Depends on really how the offense is running, because that's what it's going to come down to, and whether or not Andy Reid is running up the score, or if he's allowing teams to stay close. But the reality is I think Kelce is still one of the best tight ends in football, and he's still one of the best to ever play the position. I don't think that has gone away. I think it's a matter of, are his legs where they were 2 or 3 years ago, or are they close to where they were 2 or 3 years ago? Because while he doesn't absolutely need the speed that he used to have, he still needs some of it to be able to do some of the things that has made him so great on the field. Getting open is one thing. It's the yak that is going to be the question mark for me, and separates him, or has separated him at times at the tight end position.
Well, I think he's got an ace up his sleeve. He's been laying the groundwork for the last couple of seasons. I think there will be at least one, if not 3-ish plays where he doubles his yak because of his threat to pitch the ball. He's going to get some safety flat-footed, knowing that he's trying to do it, and he will be able to cut off of that. And I think he will have a couple of explosive plays simply because he will fake some dudes out in the secondary that don't think he will pitch that ball.
I hate asking this right now since we're talking about him playing the actual tight end position, but do you think Reid has him throw a pass, considering this might be his last year?
For the love of God, I hope not. But I think it might be a possibility.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, you watch what they were able to do last year on offense, and it all pretty much ran through Travis Kelce, because they didn't have anybody else at the wide receiver position to be able to do what they wanted to do on the field. And that in itself could help Travis Kelce. If you get a guy like Rashee Rice back and he's 100% healthy, if you get a guy like Hollywood Brown and he can stay healthy most of the season, and then you have the growth of Xavier Worthy, and you have a Juju Smith-Schuster, and you have maybe a Jalen Royals as well, all of that can help Travis Kelce on the field and be productive, and be more productive than he was last year when he had a down season, because he was the focal point of the offense last year. He doesn't have to be the focal point this year. And we kind of talked about this in the wide receiver conversation. Kind of feels like forever ago. It was, a week ago? A little over a week ago at this point. When we talked about the wide receivers, the offense is always run through the tight end. Is this the season, knowing that Travis is so close to hanging it up, is this the season where Andy says, okay, I know I've run it through the tight end a lot. Maybe we need to start trying to focus on running it through a wide receiver, because we have a couple of those that are going to be here for at least another year or two, whereas Kelce isn't, and you don't really have, as we've said many times, you don't really have a replacement for him. You're not going to have a replacement for him. It's really hard to run that type of offense through a tight end that doesn't have the dynamics or close to the dynamics of Kelce.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. And I do think that this is the time, with everything leading in this direction, for Rashee Rice to emerge. I do think he should be the first option. And as the offense evolves a little bit back towards deeper balls, going to the wide receivers first, and having, honestly, bit player sounds negative, but having more targets, secondary receivers, to then take up a little of that slack too, I think it opens the whole thing up for Travis. And in the end, I think he reaps the benefits, and we do see him return closer to where he normally is. Will it be 100%? I can't say that. He's going to have a little bit of help. He's going to have some guys that are going to contribute along with him, give him a little bit of relief.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right in the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
The Chicago Bears will either have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL this season or a massive disappointment due to injuries.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast.
Pro Football Focus ranked the NFL offensive lines and put them in the top 5, which I think we can all see the path there and why PFF and others can be excited about this Bears offensive line. But I want to kind of go through what makes them a top 5 offensive line, but then also where I think the real possibility of underwhelming and underachieving on the offensive line and having further problems there that we thought would be solved this offseason that maybe weren't ultimately solved. And then I kind of want to put them head to head with some of the other top offensive lines in the NFL to kind of get a sense of where they land in this sort of precarious position between, I don't want to say boom or bust, but certainly between solved and same old issues. It's probably the better dichotomy to put there. But PFF's offensive line rankings put the Chicago Bears at number 4 with 3 teams ahead of them, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Denver Broncos, and the Buffalo Bills. They're just ahead of the Indianapolis Colts, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Minnesota Vikings, Atlanta Falcons, New York Jets, and Los Angeles Chargers. And it's interesting that we thought of the Lions having one of the best offensive lines in football with Ben Johnson, and yet you swap out, I guess their center retired, and then they lost Kevin Zeitler in free agency, and now all of a sudden, not in the top 10. I think they're still well rated by PFF in their article, and even the Packers were high in this list. If you look around the NFC North, it was a well-regarded offensive line group. The Lions were at 13, and the Packers were at 14. So all 4 NFC North teams in the top half of the league in terms of offensive line in PFF's rankings, but it feels almost shocking to see the Bears viewed as a top 5 anything, especially not defense, but specifically a top 5 offensive line, the position group that's been the bane of all of our existences for pretty much, my entire lifetime. I don't know. They had a couple years with good offensive lines during the Lovie Smith era, but it's been a good decade or two since consistent offensive line play has been a thing in Chicago. And that was such an emphasis of Ryan Poles this offseason in a way that it feels like the last 2 or 3 general managers haven't done, trading for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, signing Drew Dahlman, drafting Ozzie Trapillo in the second round. Like, it was a very clear investment in that position to try and build them up to be a top 5 group. And so entering 2025, they're already being viewed in that light. And I think it's easy to sort of see how this group goes through this season and emerges and maintains as a top 5 offensive line. If you think about Joe Thuney right away at left guard, he's been a Pro Bowler the last 3 years in a row and a number of times throughout his career. Like, he adds instant credibility and leadership and shores up that spot that hasn't been missing in talent, but just missing in durability with Tevin Jenkins the last few seasons. But like, that's obviously, even when healthy, Joe Thuney's a better player than Tevin Jenkins. And then the fact that Thuney doesn't miss time is also a huge upgrade over what the Bears had with Tevin Jenkins there. Drew Dahlman at center is not as durable perhaps as Coleman Shelton was last season, but clearly a much better center and a clear upgrade there. Someone who's a more consistent, effective run blocker who can get out in space and run the outside zone type of plays that Ben Johnson wants to predicate his offense around in the ground game. Like, the run game upgrade is going to be massive there. And then he's also a more consistent pass rusher as well. That's why you go out and make Drew Dahlman the highest paid center in football. Jonah Jackson, you can see him getting back to the Pro Bowl level. We saw him play with Ben Johnson in Detroit, despite the last year and with the Rams not going particularly well. I think there's an understanding that you put him back at one position, you kind of let him focus just there, and now get him back with the same offensive coach, and that he can get back to that level of play. And then, Darnell Wright, we know, is a solid right tackle. We'll see who wins the Bears left tackle battle, but presumably probably still going to be Braxton Jones if he gets healthy here quickly at the beginning of training camp. And you feel like those are both fine offensive tackles. So if you have a much, much upgraded interior with really solid tackles on the edge, you can feel like it's a really solid group across the board, all 5 players. And I think a big part of why the Bears get to be a top 5 offensive line here isn't even purely about the player upgrades they made, but the impact that Ben Johnson will have on the offensive line. Now, to be clear, like PFF didn't cite this specifically in the rankings, but I think for me personally, if I'm trying to make the case as to why the Bears are going to have a top 5 offensive line this season, all the player upgrades, of course, but then also an offensive coach who will put them in a better position to be successful, who will call plays in a sequence and order that sets up future plays, that distracts and confuses opposing defenses so it's less clear and predictable what the offensive line is going to be doing on any play, and mixing play action in there, right? And then play action can help the pass protection, right? And the running game can help the pass protection, and leaving tight ends and the amount of tight ends that Ben Johnson's going to use, right? All the different ways that he will run this offense will make everyone's job easier, including the offensive lines. And that was kind of one of the debates last year with the Bears offensive line, is how bad was the offensive line versus how bad was it the offensive play calling, and maybe Caleb Williams holding onto the ball too long and making the offensive line's job easier or more difficult. You will have eliminated most, if not all of that, by adding Ben Johnson. Maybe the Caleb Williams holding the ball thing is still a question, but in theory, Ben Johnson is supposed to improve that as well. So I think we'll really get a sense of like the pure talent of this offensive line being squeezed to the maximum. And then we'll get a sense of like, are these players really good enough, or are they getting as much as they can out of them and it's still not good enough? But I think when you have former Pro Bowler in John Jackson, a Pro Bowler in Joe Thuney, and guys like Braxton Jones, Drew Dahlman, and Donald Wright that are like above average players at their positions, it's pretty easy to talk yourself into this O-line being a top 5 group this upcoming season. Now, that being said, I think I can also talk myself into this group not living up to those top 5 expectations. I think back to last season when we spent a lot of the offseason. Remember the Bears defense was talking about how we're going to be a top 5 defense in the NFL. We're going to be a top 5 defense. We're a top 5 group. And then, of course, they finish 13th in points and 27th in yards. And just because you have a really talented group on paper and a good roster that you feel like is going to be good doesn't always mean it plays out that way. I think there's a little more security in this Bears offensive line, but the path to them failing is also, let's say, clear. I'm not going to say likely, but like obvious, right? You don't have to sort of like make up hypotheticals and bend over backwards to find the exact right scenarios where the offensive line might not be as good as you thought it was, because there's some recent history with more than half of these guys that suggests like, hey, maybe you should be prepared just in case things don't go quite the way you want them to. It's easy to get excited about this Bears offensive line and see all of the additions and changes that Ryan Poles made, resulting in a top 5 offensive line. And in all likelihood, the most likely outcome here is that the Bears offensive line is much improved. But as you look at these players individually, you can start to see some of the cracks here. And I'm always just hesitant with this because of how much we talk about the Bears being, they're always the offseason champions, right? Every 3 or 4 years in a row, it feels like the Bears won the offseason for all the great moves that they made. And of course, each of the last handful of seasons, when you get to the regular season, all of those great moves in the offseason didn't end up turning out to be great moves. And we look back and we're like, well, what the heck, what went wrong? Why didn't we see this coming? Or why did we think they would be great when they ultimately weren't great? And I think there's still some benefit of the doubt that the Bears have to regain, even though it's, new coaching staff, and that's really supposed to be the big difference maker here. But nonetheless, like, we've been really excited about even offensive line additions before. You're hard pressed to find Bears fans that were disappointed when they signed Nate Davis as a free agent from the Tennessee Titans. He had been a pretty consistent player for them, and he marked like a veteran, significant upgrade in the offensive line. And of course, that proved to be an absolutely disastrous free agent signing. And so just because it looks great in March, April, May, June, July, doesn't always mean it ends up being great on the field in the regular season. Now, I don't think this applies to Joe Thuney. I think that is as safe and secure and strong of a trade and an offensive line upgrade as you can possibly find. There's no reason to think anything will go wrong with Joe Thuney, and anything that does go wrong with Joe Thuney is completely just bad luck and not something that should have been able to see coming or whatever it might be. Like, there's no reason to doubt Joe Thuney's going to be an excellent Pro Bowl caliber offensive lineman for the Chicago Bears this season. I think there's generally no reason to doubt that Darnell Wright will continue to play at a high level. Maybe not a Pro Bowl right tackle just yet, but like we've seen him be durable, be reliable, maybe takes a step forward, but like you're not going to get worse. So you're not going to get bad right tackle play. I think we know those two spots are about as secure and solid as you could hope for. I have really no doubts about what's going to transpire at those positions. The other three all have question marks of varying severity, varying size.